We are on the move here at the Voice of College Football, and we've got no choice. We got to be on the move because we are keeping track of the transfer portal starting next week. And of course, recruiting all the time here with Leanne Herring. Appreciate you stopping by, folks. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. And again, Leanne right next to me to do the heavy lifting. I'm just here for the ride. Leanne, how you doing tonight?
Doing good, as you guys can probably see. I had to do the backwards hat action, stand on business. There is a lot going on. We got a big weekend this past weekend. Of course, I spent most of it in Dallas again for the final regular season closing week of OT7, scouting some of the nation's top talent for the last couple weeks out in Dallas. Also had didn't have boots on the ground, as they say, out in the Carolinas this weekend, but another big opportunity for a lot of the kids out of the Carolinas, which we know between Clemson, USC, UNC, and some of those East Coast schools have really been using the Carolinas as a backyard for recruiting. There was an Under Armour camp out in Charlotte. A lot of the South Carolina kids, including some of Bill Belichick's biggest commits, were on hand. South Carolina, some of their top commits were on hand. Only upping up their value, creating a little bit of stir, as you see these commits start making their final decisions. I only feel, Mark, that it only causes a lot of these other programs to go after these kids. We have some flips brewing, possibly down in Gainesville for a top Nebraska commit, who's from Florida, who's also been on the move. And then we have some rising young stars between the Under Armour, of course, a name. It's. I love that in this off season, to try to entertain ourselves, we start talking about rankings, polls. I know earlier in the college football show, you were talking about going through your teams and stuff, but also early Heisman talk. So I thought we talked a little bit about DJ Lagway. Not that I haven't said enough about the kid. I know I didn't want to say too much about him on the Ole Miss show because I think he left a pretty sour taste, and plenty of Rebels fans still from that big upset down in Gainesville this past season. But again, lots to talk about. Definitely on the move. We're here prime time, taking calls in between all that. So, like you always say, leave your comments in the chat. Open up the chat lines. We're excited to be here. So we are on the move. So where do we start? Because there's a lot going on, Mark.
Let's
So
start with this, Leanne. Before we let you rip through the intel and the scouting, let's set the stage for what we've got here at the Voice of College Football. So, recruiting, of course, folks, is the lifeblood of any college football program. So, we started a recruiting channel here at the Voice of College Football. So, you're probably watching here on the main channel, but we would love for you to check out the recruiting channel that we have established with Leanne and myself. We go live typically on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Are we going to continue to do that? We shall see. We will guarantee that we will be live at some point during the week. Maybe we stay prime time. Maybe we go back to our normal spot, but we will go live here each and every week to talk recruiting in the transfer portal with you. So we would love for you to be aboard because this is where it's at, again, in terms of these programs building toward the future. It starts with recruiting, and Leanne is one of the best in the field in regards to the scouting, the recruiting, the intel, the connections that she makes. So we are so fortunate to have her here. So we are putting her to work here at least once a week, talking recruiting with all of you. And as she mentioned, we're going to leave the link in the chat. So give us a call talking transfer portal, but we would love for you to head on over to the transfer or the recruiting and transfer portal channel that we've got available, and I will leave the link there in the chat. Before you start on the OT7, a lot of people probably in the chat don't even know what that is, and I got to admit, before a couple of months ago, I didn't know what it was. Now I knew what it was by extension. I just didn't know the letters and the acronym and what it meant. So if you could kind of set the stage for where you were this past weekend and what that entire circuit's all about.
Well, a lot of the off season, it's never really, like we say on the Voice of College Football, it's not really an off season, especially for some of these young and up and coming prospects. Depending on the position, of course, that they play, Mark, a lot of the off season until spring ball starts at their respective high schools, they're training, whether they're playing basketball or they're doing track and field, multiple sports, lacrosse. But a lot of the big bread and butter for some of these high profile recruits has been for the last years is being on these 7-on-7 circuit teams. There's several companies out there where these kids are basically it's like putting together an all-star team. You got kids on several teams, some a lot of regional talent, some mixed up from all over. You got kids from Cali, Pennsylvania, the South, all on one in these big teams. But the unique thing about Overtime or OT7, it's a brand that started out, prominent with the basketball world, AAU kind of thing. And then they branched out into hosting these 7-on-7. They're a fairly new company in comparison to Pylon and Battle. But what I really like about OT7, Mark, in comparison to some of the other 7-on-7 tournaments, is for the last month, it's a one-stop shop. So usually when you're on the 7-on-7 circuit, you really are on the move because these kids are playing at battle tournaments. One week you may be in Vegas, one week you may be in Dallas, one week you may be in Miami. Whereas with OT7, this year, they have put boots on the ground here in Dallas, the Lone Star State. And what also you kind of like about it is that it's a new set of teams every other week. So it's like one week you're on, one week you're off. So they play a rotation schedule, Saturday and Sunday. They have 3 different divisions. So it's the hub of seeing the nation's top prospects all in one fitting. Because normally, Mark, we would have to wait until the All-Star games, which typically happen, in the December. So the OT7, the way they 7-on-7 it's like running an all-star thing, like an all-star weekend for 4 weeks in one place. Like I said, it's the only place where I've really seen where you can see Cam Newton on the sidelines being very vocal, being very hands-on, coaching, of course, his program C1N. And then you got RG3 takeover, of course, headed up by Robert Griffin III in his staff. You got Torrey Smith out there. You got Cam Wilder. Last weekend, the week before, of course, we know that Travis Hunter's little brother, Travius Hunter, is definitely making himself a name for himself. He was one of Derek Baker's 2020 QB out of Bilton that we've talked a lot about. He was one of his go-to targets in the end zone. Travis Hunter, there's a little bit of rumblings that are we going to see Travis Hunter next year on the OT7 co-coaching out there. So it's really a unique setting, kind of a 7-on-7 tournament. We talked a little bit about it earlier when we were breaking down some of the Rebel targets that we saw this week on the Ole Miss live show. There's a lot of course criticism when it comes to 7-on-7 because of course it's 2-touch football. You don't really get to see it. But again, for a lot of times it's an all-star setting where you can see some of the nation's top talent, go hand in hand in live reps. It's also an opportunity to see a lot of kids that we're going to talk about here, especially that you wouldn't normally see on the big stage, get their opportunity and really have the opportunity to kind of get on the radar, which I think 2 guys that we're going to talk about here that probably have been on the radar up in the East Coast, but definitely after these past couple of weeks here in Dallas, they definitely have got all the national media talking about them. So, it's an exciting week, but it's really like an all-star weekend for a month, where teams rotated, where you get some of the nation's best prospects in 2026, 2027, and even 2028.
Folks, the reason we're excited about our recruiting channel and our show On the Move that we present here each and every week is what Leanne brings to the table. So she has an illustrious resume lined up right there, and she's already added to it just here in the last few weeks. So you can catch her work covering Kentucky, University of Kentucky football and basketball recruiting as well with the Wildcats on Cats Wire. So that's part of the USA Today network. We've heard Trojans Wire here with Matt Zemek, same deal, same network, USA Today, Cats Wire. So Leanne covering Kentucky football and basketball along with, of course, the Ole Miss Rebels on the Rebel Walk. And there are Leanne's qualifications going not too far back, of course, but quite a ways from the time that you were at Brown University and then started in this field. So you love it. It's made for you and you do it well.
Well, I appreciate that. Like I said, it's come full circle being back at Kentucky. That's really where I got to have my start as a sports writer after leaving corporate sports and ditching law school. Though Adam probably hasn't joined the chat. He's always itching and trying to fill my ear of going back to law school. Maybe I will one day, but right now I'm excited to be back on the field recruiting and scouting. Getting to see this young talent. I know, of course, we talk a lot about the portal. So guys, we definitely will have you loaded next week. Believe me, if the basketball portal, which I've been covering a lot of this past week for Kentucky, is popping. I can just imagine next week and I think we'll see a lot more action. We kind of hit on it earlier with the different look of spring football and spring games for a lot of these conferences, but we were talking about it, Lane Kiffin in particular, a lot of these teams, kind of keeping things close to the vest. But I expect that a lot of these teams under these closed practices are going to use the portal to fill a lot of voids and needs. So I expect the portal maybe not as wild as it was when it initially opened, but I do expect a lot of these teams will be going to the portal to try to fill immediate voids, especially in that secondary. We talked about it about Lane Kiffin addressing, the secondary as a need and the cornerback position, not only in the transfer portal has become quite the prominent thing. Some of the guys we're going to talk about here that are cornerbacks on the high school ranks are really moving up the circuit. So the cornerbacks and the DBs are really going up in value in general because so many of these teams are looking to rebuild their secondary, not just with experienced talent, but also young talent.
Well, we're going to hit on a number of quarterbacks that you've been able to scout up close and personal here in the last few weeks, a number of styles of play out of these quarterbacks. But before we get to that, you've also had to encounter a number of variable weather situations. So it's been like 90 degrees. You've had to deal with that, and then over the recent weekend, I'll sometimes get a text from Leanne that she's got to go with the hoodie this week, or it's going to spit rain all afternoon, or something like that. So it dipped into the lower temperatures for Dallas, at least last weekend, right?
Yeah, no, I thought it was going to be a warm weekend in Texas 2 days prior to heading out to Dallas. So, I try to get everything somewhat so I'm not too much of a rush when I get into road. I'm usually in the car. It's a straight shot to Dallas, straight shot to Houston. But, the traffic's always bad with all the construction going in there. And I was like, oh, it's in the 90s, 95. It's going to be it's going to be an April hot day. Well, man, when I got to the night before, there was hail, there was rain, and we woke up to cold temperatures, and Dallas was no different. But in these kind of temperatures, you also get the opportunity, especially with the quarterbacks, to see how they react. And we definitely saw it. Some of the quarterbacks that normally we would see be more comfortable in the warmer temperatures, they had a little bit of hesitation. My favorite line of the weekend, despite Ryder Lyons, 5-star quarterback, obviously we've talked a lot about him, a top target for Ole Miss, a top target for BYU, USC, plenty of schools in the hunt for him. Despite, I'm sure, him loving that warm California weather, he was out there this weekend. Just another regular day at the office, didn't phase him. But my favorite line for the weekend was, with the cold temperatures, we often see not just receivers, but quarterbacks, especially in these situations, want to warm up their hands and put some gloves on it. And Ryder Lyons, nonchalantly said, like, I'm not Kenny Pittman. I don't wear gloves. And by the way he threw, whether it was his deep ball, we even saw him get reps in for RWE, which is of course anchored by another high profile 4-star quarterback out of Jackson, Alabama, and Landon Duckworth. He kind of snuck in there and got a tutty, as they like to call it, in the OT7. When I go to OT7, Mark, you've probably kind of seen me drop some things. I'm learning all the new lingo, tutties, money drives. I mean, it really is an exciting thing to watch. And I think, despite the criticism that 7-on-7 gets, what I love about OT7, it's fun, it's animated, and and it's kind of laid back. And I think, like, we saw that with Ryder Lyons again when I saw him and got to scout him. He wasn't, extremely showy. He was just having fun, making accurate throws, just only solidifying his reputation as a playmaker on the field. I mean, he doesn't have to go out there and prove. He consistently shows every week what he does, and he continued to do that. Like I said, during the downtime, he happened to sneak in there for RWE, making a touchdown in there. But again, another remarkable talent. It'll be interesting to see. Like I said, BYU, USC, and Oregon are the schools really to watch. But again, never leave it underestimated to Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin has been recruiting him very, very tough, very, very strongly. Even though we're not hearing it, in the national media, that Ole Miss is really in the hunt for him. And we've talked about the Ryder Lyons situation. Of course, we know he is a 2026 candidate. However, he will be going on a mission trip after he graduates. So he's not going to see any action on a field until probably 2027. So he's also a very unique situation, even possibly 2028. So, that's a really interesting recruitment and we'll see how it plays out. But again, Ole Miss very much in the driver's seat. USC, BYU, Oregon are the schools to definitely watch on him. But again, another strong weekend from Rider Lions, another day at the office, just being animated. Pulled up a couple clips, like I said, his favorite go-to target, Jamison Powell, Ole Miss commit. There's just a unique mojo. I've talked about it over and over again. I feel like a Peter the Repeater, but every time you see it, there's just this magic, this ignite. And we talk about it so much. You can put an elite athlete like Ryder Lyons, and if you don't give him that arsenal in that backfield, he's not going to have the same magic. But whether he's playing at Folsom, whether he's playing at 7-on-7, he always resonates and he translates that. So again, another young talent, very fun, very humble. Like when you see him, and you love to see that from the quarterback. Like he takes his game seriously, but he has fun with it. He's very laid back, and I can see why he talks about, he's fresh off an Ole Miss visit where he talked about, being able to feel at home. He really likes what Lane Kiffin does, how much they pour into the quarterback's development and the resources. Like we've heard a lot of quarterbacks here of lately talk about what Ole Miss does and Lane Kiffin, but he reminds me a lot about Jackson Dart in his demeanor and how he is. So that's why I continue to say we're not talking a lot about Ole Miss, but I guarantee you Lane Kiffin and that staff would rather have it that way because they want to hear about Oregon and BYU being out in the front. But again, Jamison Powell, I'm sure, is becoming a primary recruiter. But it was another strong weekend for Rider Lions and a lot of quarterbacks down despite the cold weather.
Well, there's no doubt, Leanne, you've given me an education on recruiting over the last several months doing this show. And Leanne sets me up with lists of players, and then I go get to investigate, look up their huddle tapes, and get familiar with them. Where in the past, obviously, I got to talk recruiting here every day regardless, but this is a little deeper of a dive for me. But this is a guy next on your list at quarterback that I don't remember us talking about in Oscar Rios.
He's really been on the rise. And again, this is what you got to love about 7-on-7s, regional elite camps in the off season, because you get to see kids. He's another California kid out of Downey, really rising up the ranks. I've been watching him a lot because he's high up on the Kentucky depth chart. So the Wildcats and Stoops have really been looking out of him. He was out there for Team TOA this weekend. Again, he's just exciting to watch. Really, really good in dealing with the situations and hitting his receivers. He's extremely accurate. He's great at stretching the field. He made some nice throws, and like I said, his accuracy, he's just another kid that has slowly been rising up the ranks the last couple of months as he's been going through this OT7 with Team TOA, anchoring that team, but also, going to we talked a little bit about him, I believe a couple of weeks ago. He was kind of one of the guys to watch, when he was out at the Elite 11 regional out in California. He was kind of, again, making his kind of statement. Again, these kids don't just get this talent overnight. It's just now that they have a national platform where they get more eyes on them, like national media, like at a place like OT7. So again, despite 7-on-7 having its qualms about it, getting to see these kids in live reps, getting to see more of Oscar Rios, because remember, this is like putting together an all-star squad. This is not like a high school program where he's comfortable with all the receivers he's going to have. He knows of these guys. He practices, but the real time they really get to grind, these guys are all coming on flight every weekend. It's like having an NBA All-Star game. It's like having a Pro Bowl. They come together for a weekend and play ball together. And that's what you got to love about this. And it kind of just shows that I think if I'm a scout or if I'm a coach, you can take away so much from 7-on-7. But what I like is that it's showcasing that this kid and these players can adapt and adjust. And that's what you want to see on a field, because that's what's going to translate into a ball game. It's great to see live film, from football season for scrimmages. But what I really like about this is that you're putting together players that don't typically play together and they're having to make things happen. So it just shows that, in the quarterback situation, that these are guys that can adapt and adjust. You can put a receiver that they're familiar with, like the Ryder Lions Powell Mojo connection, like I like to call it, or you can put Oscar Rios with a kid that he knows is an elite receiver, but he doesn't play with him often other than outside of 7-on-7 teams. So those are a lot of factors that you get to see. It's really, an interesting makeup of how you can evaluate and really look at some of these kids at a closer angle.
We had Ryan Abraham on here on the College Football Show earlier this week from 247 Sports on USC, and we asked him about high school football recruiting in the state of California, Southern California in particular, because there have been a lot of movement just in regards to people leaving California, number one. Number two, movement away from tackle football. For a lot of people. So Georgia's emerged as maybe the third best state in high school recruiting. California is still extremely strong, but we talked about how maybe the line play in California has not been what it used to be. But the quarterbacks and receivers, skill players, still pretty heavy in that state, including a guy that you're tracking in 4-star quarterback Luke Fahey.
Luke Fahey was playing with California Power. I mean, they were just dynamic. Howie had Fahey had a whole bunch of receivers, Georgia commit, Bowman, who we're going to talk a little bit about later. But I mean, he had 23 touchdowns. Of course, he's out of Mission Viejo. He's another quarterback that's definitely been on the rise, been on the ears of a lot of programs lately. Could be a long, maybe not a starting quarterback for some of these bigger programs, but definitely has a lot of skill that you can build around. He had all sorts of all sorts of guy. We're going to talk about Vance Spafford, that tight end Bowman. He just has a great command of the offense. He was really accurate all weekend. He's the number 23 quarterback in the country. Some of the schools that he's looking at are Syracuse, Stanford, and Texas Tech. So some very interesting, kind of diverse, but the way that Fahey plays, I can see him going to any of those programs. Of course, we know that Texas Tech has definitely been on the rise as far as a hub now in the Big 12, but also for what they've been doing with NIL. We saw what they did with the transfer portal, the elite class, as far as the football package, players that they put together. But Texas Tech is really kind of winding in. So, Fahey, not so much on the radar with some of the bigger programs, but definitely a strong skill set that could be, again, a good talent with the right fit, like a place like Syracuse or like Texas Tech, that maybe not the first choices of many of these power quarterbacks, but again, could be a great fit for him to really shine and potentially be a starter.
Got Leanne Herring here to break down the top recruits that she witnessed over the weekend and for the last several weekends in the OT7 camps across Texas and across the South as they make their way to a championship game in LA in June. Gavin Sidwar is a top 25 rated quarterback according to the 247 Sports composite out of LaSalle College in Warrenton, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, the Cali kids impressed me. The Southern kids always come to play, but I'm gonna say across the board of all the quarterbacks that I saw this weekend, not taking any away from Duckworth, Lyons, Rios, Fahey, this kid right here really set the tone for me. Like, he came out along with his partner in crime over there, Joey O'Brien, who just stole the show all weekend at OT7. They both came out playing, of course, for level 82, giving Low Pro, the only team that had been undefeated for the last couple of weeks, competing a lot of kids out of Nevada, gave them their first loss of the season. They went 5-0 all weekend long, but man, this kid really thrived in the cold conditions. I mean, from the deep ball to his accuracy, he's just a kind of player that really is calm and cool and collective, but in big situations, he's a big moment kind of player. Like, he makes big moves in big moments, big throws, and he's a dynamic playmaker, and he really truly impressed me across the board. He was consistent, and he gave some of the other guys, including Ryder Lyons and that offense, a run for their money all weekend long. So Gavin Sidwar, like, he really made a mark for me, and I'm sure he's going up the board. with a lot of other schools, of course, recently off an Ole Miss visit. But I believe that after today, he's going to have even more kids, more programs calling him because, again, he was a quarterback that really stood out to me, impressed me all weekend. I know we're all, like I said, everyone's talking about Ryder, everyone's talking about Duckworth, Rios, but this kid really, for me, stood on business all weekend long, was super consistent. I got, of course, to talk with him a little bit before and after. Of course, like I said, he's fresh off an Ole Miss visit. Really hoping, I think, that the Rebels will fire up that recruitment. He's not the top guy on the board, but again, that might change after this weekend and from what we saw. But he's a kid, like I said, that has got a lot of power behind him, and he shows just a variety of different looks, which really truly impressed me, especially under the cold conditions. But for Pennsylvania kids, East Coast kids, that those temperatures were nothing near cold. You've lived in Connecticut, Mark. I've lived in Rhode Island. We know that Texas cold necessarily isn't East Coast kind of temperatures, but again, he really upped his stock this weekend, I believe. And from all the guys out there, he's going to be a name that I think more programs are going to be looking to as a long haul kind of franchise guy. I think at the next level, at the college level, he's going to be something special. I think he's got a lot in his toolbox that could offer to the right program. Again, he really impressed me all weekend long from his consistency, what he has in his toolbox, and just the variety of throws and the punch he really has behind his shot.
Yeah, it was a bit chilly the other day outside. Checked the weather, 63. I checked Connecticut, 37. I checked Ohio, 27. Then I felt a little bit better about 63. Well, before we move to the offensive line, we actually have a call coming in. We've got Caden on the line. Caden, how you doing tonight?
Yeah, good evening, Mark Rogers. How you doing tonight? Good evening, Leah Ann.
Hey, thanks for calling. We're doing great. You're officially our first caller of our On the Move, so we're glad to open the phone lines. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, no problem, Leanne. Just can you do me two favors? Actually, just one simple favor. Can you please just be quiet about the Ole Miss Rebels for one? Because A, they will not be a dominant team this year, and B, they've got one thing to be worried about as far as I'm concerned, and that's Georgia. Because Georgia's on the uprise of becoming the powerhouse that they once were. The powerhouse that made people fear. Their name, their dominance, and not only their dominance, but their physicality on the football field. So I would be very cautious with my next words to Georgia fans as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I have no problem with Georgia. I think that Georgia's another team you're going to watch for, a kid that I think that I've watched out of Milton High School that's going to be really dominant in that Georgia offense is CJ Wiley. I have nothing against the Georgia Bulldogs. They may have got, like I said, right, we're talking about national recruiting. So, yeah, I mentioned the Ole Miss Rebels, but again, you're going to hear me talk about DJ Lagway, a kid that I've watched out of Willis College, to definitely put the Ole Miss Rebels on their place. But the Georgia Bulldogs have a lot of talent coming up. Of course, Zachariah Branch, there's a lot of exciting things to Georgia Bulldogs. So when it comes to the Ole Miss Rebels and Georgia Bulldogs, a lot of talent on both those things. But you're never gonna hear me say that there's anything that the Georgia Bulldogs can't do. Kirby Smart, one of the best to do it in college football when it comes to coaching.
Hey, Caden. I'm used to you getting on here, jumping on me, but can you just kind of ease back a little bit? Just take it easy just a little bit.
You want me to take it easy tonight just because there's a woman in the building?
Oh no, you are all good. I can hold my own. Believe me, we are all good. And like I said, appreciate your questions about the Georgia Bulldogs. Like I said, they have a lot of loaded Arsenal talent coming in from the transfer portal. They definitely will be one to watch in the SEC. Like I said, really excited to see the young guy, CJ Wiley, again. If you are a Georgia fan, which is clearly to see that you are. I love Athens myself. I don't know if you're a widespread Panic fan, but I do love me some Georgia Bulldogs in Athens. So I'm not only an Ole Miss Rebel, I definitely love the Georgia Bulldogs. But like I said, a lot of promising talent. I think that Kirby Smart is always meticulous when it comes to building. But again, we've seen what Georgia has done all season, even in those tough moments. You got to love it about Kirby Smart. Even in those tough moments, he knows how to finish. So again, nothing against the Georgia Bulldogs. Hell of a team. and a lot of exciting things
But
coming
let's
for them.
let's not forget there's one more team on the loose that Ole Miss needs to be really, and I mean really, keep their eyes peeled on, and that's my Ohio State University Buckeyes, defending national champions, and the team who's now, I told Mark, the era of destruction has begun. And not only that, I have foreseen it that Ohio State will not only destroy their opponents on their schedule this year, including Texas, who clearly is not ready for somebody as physical, as dominant, and as bloodthirsty, as hungry as the Ohio State Buckeyes. But everybody else, I don't care if you're from the ACC, the SEC, I don't care if it's Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss Rebels. You better watch your mouth when you come across Ohio State, because one word, and those boys are really going to be up on you and beat the living heck out of y'all. And I'm going to just warn you, there's a whole lot more that Ohio State defense is capable of. And I've told your buddy Mark Rogers this. I had a little personal conversation during during an event I was at the Woody Hayes with the boys over there, and I was sitting down with Coach Laurinaitis. And I told him, you know what, Coach Laurinaitis, you know what I missed about that program was the way that Coach Tressel set the tone in that very specific program. He was the guy that put fear back into college football, that when you came up to Columbus, you were not ready to be ready to play Ohio State, because you knew it was going to be an execution of a night. Y'all were going to get executed. And the three words, I've said it to Mark's buddy Jackson Johnson here, HDR, hurt, destroyed, repeat. That's all that Ohio State defense and that Ohio State team did, was hurt, destroy, repeat. And when you came up to Columbus, you knew it was going to be it was basically death row for anyone.
Jack. All right, Caden. So the most accurate thing that you just stated was, as I've told Mark, because basically the 28 other times that you've called me, it's turned out to be the same call. So do you have anything else for us, Caden, besides your rant of destruction?
The rant of destruction, Mark. See, this is why I really honestly am thankful that you actually take up with my words, Mark. You know, I appreciate it.
Does somebody also listen to you?
Oh, you know what? I can speak for, and actually, I'm with the boys actually at my job here at Ohio Cat, the local Caterpillar dealer, and actually 3 of the service mechanics over here are listening to me, and they actually are they're nodding their heads at this point right now, and 3 of my boys actually are over here agreeing with me, and actually I got 4 thumbs up.
Well, what was I saying earlier, Mark? Was it on the Ole Miss show that I was praising Ohio State as far as, we talk about the different looks. I don't know what your opinion is about, spring football and how it's looking a lot different. Of course, a lot of programs, including Ole Miss and many of the SEC programs, Big Ten programs, opting not to have these traditional spring games, which, we like to see. But I told Mark that, Ohio State, you got to love what they're doing. I think it's a great thing what they're doing as far as keeping that spring game on. I think that that's going to be a turning point, as if they needed any more, opening as far as recruiting. But I was praising Ohio State earlier. I love what you were talking about the defense. True. When they got Quinshon Judkins, probably worst thing that could have happened to Ole Miss as far as a running back room. It was great to see Quinshon Judkins get the opportunity to really light it up for that Ohio State backfield and what he did. So definitely no hard feelings here. But man, this weekend, Ohio State, I wouldn't be surprised if there's an additional commitment or 2. There's a lot of guys on the radar, but I think that they're really going to soak up the things, having, not shying away from being a traditional powerhouse when it comes to the recruiting and having a spring game. So I think there's a lot of things, much like what I talked about with Georgia, that are going on with Ohio State. So no argument for me there.
And here's the other thing too, Leanne. This is the special part about Ohio State's program, is that not only legends pay back, but these are the guys who also paved the way for some guys like myself, my age, 21, 22, 20. To get in there and actually lace up a pair of cleats and get up in there and actually get to work, get to do the things that they did before us. They're the guys who didn't just, when they stepped out of Ohio State, they just, said, oh my gosh, like, this is our time. Like, no, they let the younger generation come in and step up to play the game like they did before us. And that's the thing I appreciate. And I said that's the special part about Ohio State's program, is that not only Coach Laurinaitis is a former Buckeye, And not only Coach Hardline's a former Buckeye, and we've got plenty of former Buckeyes on that roster that watch these kids get in there, but also get to work the same way, the same discipline, the same tradition that is in this program. And that is the bottom line at Ohio State.
Well, you got to love that tradition. Like I said, very blue collar, gritty, similar to what you got to love about the Big Ten. As much as we talk about, other conferences, that's what you got to love about the Big Ten. Blue collar, gritty, get down to business. That's why you got to love watching Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, because like you said, there's still those places that keep a lot of tradition and they still keep them intact. And you got to love that, because in a time where we're straying so much away, we're making so many rules, that kind of takes away from the game. It is great to hear about like what you're sharing about Ohio State, kind of keeping that blue collar mentality, standing on business. So like I said, Mark's probably loving this here, me talking love about Ohio State as much as I am. But again, you got to love that blue collar mentality and that gritty, and that's in that grittiness that you see in programs like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. They just kind of separate themselves, and clearly that's why Ohio State has a national champion, because they were able to start what they finished and finish strong. Like they say, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. But again, Ohio State, despite the ups and downs, on and off the field, they still stood on business. They knew how to handle business. And that much is, like you said, it's because of tradition, the culture that goes on there.
But it's also because you have to understand the change in the locker room, the change in the coaching position. But as I stated before, like I said to Mark Rogers previously, I told him previously, and I don't know if you paid attention to that episode, and I told him of what I told Coach Larnett, especially Coach Hardline. I told him I wanted them to bring back the same mentality that Coach Tressel had at Ohio State previously, because that was the way that really set the program on the map. That's what set us to be the school that we are. And not taking anything away from Coach Hayes, but Coach Tressel was the guy that went in there and really buffed up our locker room, not only buffed up the attitude, buffed up the mentality. And not only that, that's the mindset that I want every Buckeye, especially to lace up a pair of cleats when they step into that locker room, is that this was the program that Coach Tressel realized and said, you know what? I don't want this program to go downhill. I want this program to be the same way that they have been, but just for once, beef up the attitude a little bit. Beef those boys up, because they need to get ready, especially when they play like the team out north. Anyone. They want to. There's only three things, like I said previously, the three letters HDR. That's all that is to it, and that's all that Coach Tressel basically promoted to the defensive locker room at Ohio State.
Caden, we appreciate your call. Did you have anything else for us besides repeating the same points over and over? Do you have anything else for us, Caden?
Here's the thing. The only reason I'm just repeating the point, Mark, is just so I made it crystal clear to you. Because sometimes I find it very much so that you don't get it. When I make a point, you don't get it specifically clearly to your head. Clearly, it sounds like hold on. Here's the thing, Mark. It seems like your brain can't comprehend about how much I'm trying to say that's clearly specifically accurate. But however, I find here's the thing I find about you, Mark. I find something about you that I really don't understand how you cannot understand the fact that when I've said it every single dadgum time on your show, yet you think that I mean it as some kind of stupidness. No, every time I remind folks of what this program was and that it should have been and should have stayed, it should be. Because let's be honest, Ohio State is no soft team. We are no soft. But I'm going to tell you this.
Thanks, Caden. All right. That's enough of that.
Well, just speaking to his point, you got to love his passion and you got to love what he's driving. And, that's what kind of drives. I love hearing the fact when you got fans like him that are very outspoken and traditionalist. And, kind of speaking to his point, I agree with what he's saying. You want that team to hold that tradition of that program that you once knew. But again, before we let him go, I was also going to say that for a coach, for a new era, for a coach, while it's important for them to hold on the traditions at our Ohio State that other coaches set the tone for them, that laid the foundation for, you also have to remember you got to evolve with the times. And my thing is, we talk about culture, we talk about identity. I think for teams to really be successful, no matter what conference they are, you also have to allow the head coach to be the head coach, and you have to allow them to bring their own identity into that program. And I think that's the battle we face a lot. And we hear a lot of criticism from fans that have watched the program evolve over different coaches, have seen them come and go, this idea of traditionalism. And I'm all about tradition, but again, Dallas Cowboys, perfect example of where you have somebody who yearns to win, but they are still living in a decade that of winning, but yet you got a lot of people that can't let go of being the leader. They won't let the head coach. They won't let the GMs do their job. So again, as much as I believe in what Caden is saying, as far as like you want to see those traditions remain on. You want to see that gritty Ohio State, that Big Ten blue collar mentality that you love to see. But again, I also believe that you have to allow coaches, as new staff come in, they also have to bring their own thumbprint and their own identity, because I feel like if you're trying, I always say it, if you're trying to be another team, if they're trying to be the Ohio State team that they were a bunch of years ago when they were winning natties under a different coach, that's never going to translate, because you're trying to chase a ghost, in my opinion. But it's always great to hear for our first caller, very animated and always excited to hear a viewpoint. That's why I want to take calls, because it makes it exciting. But again, great point. I definitely would love to see him in a pregame speech out there, especially if I was on the defensive side. He definitely looks like he could create a lot of chaos and definitely rev up a locker room. So thanks for calling.
Thanks for calling, Caden. I know we've had our go-arounds a few times, so I laid back this time. All right, very good. Well, Leanne, we'll take it from the quarterback position to the guys up front. And I know that you've got an offensive tackle coming from that same Cali Power team that you have rated very highly, as does just about everybody else.
Felix Ojo is a guy that everybody's talking about. Of course, we know that for the big guys up front, the 7-7, 7-on-7 really isn't their scene, but we're kind of seeing more 7-on-7s try to include these guys. Ojo was in there. Of course, we know he's out of Lake Ridge here in Texas, but he was taking reps with the Cali Power team. So, of course, you don't have to be a regional player to be able to take reps under center. Again, like I said, not many OTs on the 7-on-7 circuit, but again, Ojo always being the exception to the rule. It's obvious that when you hear him where he's going to go, this is one of the most talked about recruitments as far as one of the powerhouse guys up front in the trenches. Of course, the Texas Longhorns seem to be at the forefront when you hear Ojo talk about them visiting them. They really seem to be at the forefront. But again, there's some other teams to be looking at that he's going to set visits at. Ohio State is one of those places. Ole Miss. He also might make possible stops at Oklahoma and Florida. So again, there's a lot of the teams that we mentioned that he's also looking to include outside his official visit. So this is going to be an interesting recruitment to watch. But again, he was out there under center, taking in the reps, taking the time. But again, this is another exciting recruitment to watch. Always great to see an OT out there. But again, one of the most coveted OTs, out, not just out of the Lone Star State, but nationally. We see how number 2 in the country, he might even be going close to number 1 before it's all said and done. But again, not that the numbers matter, because when you see him at the field, he's just extremely physical. He has towering size. He's one of those kids that has high ceilings, and he's going to be an immediate impact. Again, there's plenty of offensive line, including those Ole Miss Rebels, those Florida Gators, and even those Oklahoma Sooners outside Texas. But again, it seems like Texas is going to be where he's going to go. They've been making a hard push from the jump, from start to finish. But again, with a high profile blue chip talent like him, there's going to be plenty of people knocking on his door. But again, Felix Ojo out at Dallas, not too far away from home, getting some reps in and showing some big love for the guys up front.
So we've got a super chat coming in from, guess who? So our guy, Caden. So I hate to see this. So Caden, come on. Okay. So I got to read the super chat where Caden says, Mark, let's be honest. You hate my guts. So Caden has said this a couple times before. Now, let's be clear, Caden. You know I don't hate you. I don't hate anyone. I appreciate your call. We're running a show here. So when you ramble on about the same things over and over and over and over endlessly, at some point we need to have a reasonable discussion here. So that is simply you just rambling on about the same senseless stuff over and over. But I like you, Caden. Thank you for calling. As Leon most effectively stated, love your passion. Love your passion. You love college football. You love your team. And so keep bringing it, and we will take your next call the next time we have a show here. So absolutely. All right.
He's definitely a diehard Buckeye. There's no taking, those chains that the kids love all the time now that they wear. He definitely would be holding one of those belts or those chains. But again, like I said, love his passion, and maybe he'll get we'll get him in the locker room to do a pregame speech, because like I said, he definitely could rev some people up.
Yeah, he will rev them up. That's for sure, one way or the other. But in going to this next player on your list, Leanne, this is a guy that I was unfamiliar with, and then we certainly highlighted him earlier today. And wow, he was making plays all over the field.
Joey O'Brien, LaSalle College, out of PA. Like I said, the East Coast kids, weather didn't faze them. They came to play. They stood on business. Joey O'Brien, I mean, he plays high school ball with Gavin Sadara. He's got that athlete. There wasn't anything this kid couldn't do, considering he had those interceptions, even including from Ryder Lyons. This is a recruitment that's going to be very interesting. I think that, of course, Notre Dame has really been the favorite and of course Michigan. Caden will be happy to hear this. Ohio State is very much in the mix for this talented guy in Joey O'Brien. And again, I think that this was just another platform for him to solidify the kind of talent he has. Again, if it wasn't for OT7s in places like Dallas or in Houston, where we get a lot of national media come in from 247 on 3, and then of course a lot of big regional outlets that are beats covering specific teams, scouting, whatnot, we probably wouldn't be hearing Joey O'Brien's name, and that's just a shame. So, like I said, this is what you got to love about these events. I think in that game that we're watching right here, there was 3 INTs just within the first couple minutes. Of course, these goes into they play them in 2 halves. So there's not a lot of time. This is not your 4-quarter traditional, but again, I get it's not a full full tackle kind of feeling, but I mean, when you can get 3 interceptions from some of the best quarterbacks in the country, we're talking 5-star, 4-star names that this kid was all over the place. Again, he's just got exceptional feel. He's another kid that creates a lot of chaos. He's smooth and fluid, but amidst that smooth and fluidity that he has when he makes big plays, he was a mismatch for wide receivers for the offense all season long. You knew that his body extension when he got there was going to make things done. So again, I think he finished with 5 interceptions, 3 pick 7s, not a pick 6, a pick 7 is what they like to call them in OT7s. Again, this kid's recruitment is about to get even hotter. Of course, the Notre Dame setting up for a big, huge recruiting weekend this weekend. O'Brien could very well be there. But again, the Irish team at the forefront. But again, Ohio State, Clemson, Michigan, and Tennessee are definitely looking for to earn his services. So again, he's already building his talent. But again, much like a lot of the guys that we've been talking about that have this elite talent that maybe hasn't been seen, like Gavin Sadar and Joey O'Brien, it's definitely these kind of weekends that can really shift and change the sales. And I think definitely that's what happened for O'Brien this weekend. Like I said, in a matter of minutes, it was 3 back INT. So this kid is extremely physical. He has a strong frame, and he's just a mismatch. He's a playmaker.
Sometimes we don't hear much from the tight end position, because obviously it's a difficult spot to fill if it's a traditional tight end spot. Now, most of these guys, or a number of these guys, become almost quasi wide receivers. But if you're going to play traditional tight end position, obviously your skill set has to be extremely broad, being able to have great hands, get downfield, but also stay in line and block almost like an offensive lineman at times. And Mark Bowman's a guy that obviously the scouts love, and you have been watching as well.
Well, we skip across one because I was about to go
Uh-oh.
Vance Spafford, but we can go back. We can talk
Oh, I'm
Bowman
sorry.
and then we can
That's my bad.
talk Spafford. Okay, so let because Spafford because Caden's gonna like Vance Spafford because he's a Georgia commit. So Caden, you see, we talked Ohio State and we talked Georgia, so it wasn't all about the Ole Miss Rebels today. So, but let's go back. Let's talk Mark Bowman. 5-star elite. He was playing with Cali Power. He was one of Luke Fahey's top targets all weekend long. There is plenty of programs that have been knocking on his door, Mark. This was just another weekend. Like I said, I was right there in the end zone. I think there was almost a couple times that me and him got face to face when he was trying to catch those balls. I mean, talk about, and like you see all the things, the qualities, all the boxes, as we like to say, you have to check off as a tight end. You not only have to be able to stretch your body, be able to have great hands, but also stay in line, and you got to block like you're playing a defense, like you're playing a defensive guy, like a defensive end. And Mark Bowman continues to check off all those boxes. And it's always great to see these guys in live reps. We already knew what kind of elite talent he is by watching his film. But again, this is what I love about the 7-on-7 and that laid back kind of atmosphere versus playing in a high school setting. I think it really allows their talent to even see it at a higher level because it's a fun, less pressure kind of situation. It's competitive, but again, I really feel that in this setting, you really get to see, you know, a different side of these guys, a different side of their talent be unleashed. And again, being able to have that quick chemistry with so many different types of guys that you normally don't play with that are not your go-to guys. Cali Power definitely had it all locked down with Fahey, having Spafford, having Bowman, and having a lot of other guys. But again, for me, what I saw a lot about him as far as where he was going, you talked a lot about it. He checks off the boxes. He's got impressive frame, his control, his catch radius. Of course, I always talk about it when it comes to tight ends, having that unique extension when it comes to being able to control their body movement, but also being able to extend far enough out for those unusual catches. Because we know when we put a tight end in for a package that they're probably going to be catching those tougher than usual catches. So they're going to have to extend their body, but still be able to control it. He definitely checked off all those boxes this weekend. Another team, of course, it's in the lead. And we know that Felix Ojo's probably helping with that recruitment, or the Texas Longhorns. They seem to also be taking the lead in Bowman's recruitment. Ole Miss is another place he's also talked about seriously considering and taking another visit. USC, Georgia, Alabama, all he has shared. He's another kid that we've seen happen a lot this past season. Of course, he was a 2027 who's reclassified to 2026. So again, as a regular season comes to a close in OT7, it's going to be interesting to see where these teams that are going to be playing Cali Power out in the championship and the playoffs. Of course, it's a gold ticket weekend out in OT7 where some teams that we haven't seen during the regular season are kind of going to vie to be able to have an opportunity to be able to play and go head to head with people like Cali Power, Low Pro. But again, Mark Bowman, tight end out of Cali, showing only solidifying why he's a 5-star and why he is as advertised, and definitely living up to his billing.
Quick diversion here. I'll answer the question coming in from Pitt Snipe Husker. So basically asking about the 105 roster limit and the settlement that's going on right now, and the hearing started on Monday. So basically the judge has said that this settlement's going to go through. There's no question about that. So the nuts and bolts of the settlement are going to go through, but there's about 2 or 3 conditions that Judge Wilkins says that need to be corrected. And one would be just this flat out cut of the rosters to 105 on July 1st, that she's not going to tolerate that. There's going to have to be some grandfather clause in there that the players that are currently on rosters, not just in football, but across the board, are going to be grandfathered in to continue to be able to play. And so those rosters are going to have be more expansive for a few years, but it's going to affect the incoming freshmen. And so that 105 number is not going to be necessarily a hard and fast rule starting this season, but that's eventually where they're going to get to in approximately 4 years, just to answer your question there. Now, Leanne, we can get back to the Georgia commit, Vance Spafford.
Well, if we're going to get excited about Georgia, like I said, that backfield, we know that the wideout room has definitely been something that the Georgia Bulldogs have needed to address, and they've definitely addressed it, adding from the transfer portal with the Branch brothers, of course. CJ Wiley, an upcoming kid that we've talked a lot about, this offseason out of Milton, already out in Athens, making a name for himself. So again, Vance Spafford was another go-to kid, 4-star wide receiver, Georgia commit, that was one of Luke Fahey's other go-to receivers, making plays all weekend long. Of course, he's out of Mission Viejo in California. He's just what I like to call a technician. He's a guy that can, like I say, I talk about dissecting, but he's just really meticulous and explosive all at the same time. But he does it very in a controlled, meticulous manner. He knows how to move the chains. He knows how to get open. He knows how to get into that end zone. And you could definitely sense it all weekend, that connection he has. Look at that extension right there. I mean, I got to see this up close and personal, being in that corner end zone, and getting to see these kids. And this is what you got to lie about reps, because what I love about getting so close versus being in a high school setting and this kind of setting is you really get to see these kids and their motions and how their body extension. You get to see their footwork up close and personal. You get to see their movement because you don't have this overbearing crowd. So for me, when I'm scouting these kids, I want to see their footwork. I want to be able to concentrate and look at different areas of their movement and body. And that's what you got to love about a smaller setting like OT7 or 7-7 on general, because you really get to see how they work, how their speed really is, how they're able to react. And now they may not be running crazy explosive routes, but again, you get to study some of the other intangibles that, the boxes they need to check off when you're really looking at a position specifically.
Leanne Herring and myself getting together for On the Move. This is what we do, folks. We've been doing this for about 30 weeks now here at the Voice of College Football. Usually we're hiding over on the recruiting channel, but this is letting you know that you need to make it on over to our recruiting channel and catch the latest. So we're going to show up here on the main channel for a number of weeks. We'll see how long, but we thought we'd kick it to prime time. So some of you could show up and give us a call, leave a comment or question there in the chat. And again, so expect us in prime time over the next several weeks. And who knows, maybe for the next year or 2 or 50, I don't know, but we will figure out. That's why it's important to, of course, subscribe here at the Voice of College Football, hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. All right, a couple wide receivers that you like here, I see, are next on the list.
Just some notables, as much as we like to showcase all the names, the national names, the 4 and the 5-star, there's a couple of kids that definitely caught my eye this weekend out of Belleville, Michigan. He's really on the move. He was really eccentric all weekend long. His 2027 wide receiver, Trey Britton III. This is a guy to watch. I mean, he's super explosive. He was also playing for Cali Power, had a couple tutties, as they'd like to say in there. But this is a kid I'm really excited to watch. I think his recruitment's really going to heat up. Playmaker, extremely explosive. Another name to get to know is 4-star wide receiver Keenan Chapman out of Jackson, Alabama. Of course, we know that he takes the field with 4-star quarterback Landon Duckworth. He was out there with Landon Duckworth taking some reps for RWE. He's really another kid that can create a mismatch when it comes to the offensive side of the ball when he's trying to get protected on that defense. Super shifty, extremely speedy. Plays multiple sports. So again, his showcase of his speed really showed. But those are 2 names up from OT7 week 4, the regular season finale, that I really want to feature, because again, as much as we want to talk about the names, we know we go to these events to be able to bring light and kind of scout new talent and kind of talk about the kids that you need to watch ahead of time, because 2027 is not so far around the corner. And like we saw with Mark Bowman, a lot of these 2027 kids, Mark, after they're starting to get recognition, they're not only reclassifying, we're also seeing that we're getting a lot of 2027 commits want to solidify their future and already start to build a relationship. So we're seeing a lot of 2027s already commit as well.
We just got done with the Miami show, and one of the highlights there was one of the top defensive backs in the 26 class. Not coming up with his name, but anyway, he flipped from Georgia to Miami just this past weekend. And here we have another flip brewing, possibly you're and another cornerback in play in the state of Florida.
The cornerbacks have become such a hot commodity on the transfer portal, and especially on the high school scene. They've become, just a player. Their stock is definitely rise. They're definitely in high demand. We know that there's a lot of action going on in Gainesville. Billy Napier really, went from being in a dumpster fire to making a complete turnaround. This season he's definitely done on his way to a pretty solid recruiting class and a lot of attention down in Gainesville, and they are looking to flip one of their own. We were talking a little bit about Nebraska. You were talking a little bit about it. There was some heated conversation, some interesting conversation on the college football show. I always have to make sure to emphasize the. I don't know if you got that from because having to say the Ohio State all the time, but anyway, going back to that, there's a possible flip brewing. Of course, spring is in the air. We know that there is a lot of flip potential here happening, and the Gators hosted Nebraska commit 4-star corner CJ Brano. He is a Florida kid. And there is a lot of talk, a lot of rumblings that we're hearing that visit really did impact, possibly, another return visit. He's also looking to take visits to Florida State. He will return back to Nebraska for another visit and Penn State. But what we're hearing that Billy Napier and the Gators really just have really set the tone from him from this last visit, and that he really loves the opportunity. As much as we hear so much about these top recruits wanting to, go a little bit away from home. In his case, what they're putting on the table, the opportunity, the fit that they kind of see him playing at Florida as a Gator has really kind of sparked that interest of the possibility of possibly being an instant impact player, playing closer to home. But this is a kid that just has tremendous speed. When you watch his film, he's got that wide receiver speed. He has that unique separation that I talk about when you're cornerback. He creates chaos and he just knows to dissect. But again, his internal radar, being able to read the field, and just his reaction time when you see him is out of this world. It's really interesting. So it is no question why the Florida Gators are trying to work. We've talked a lot about the secondary being a big need for a lot of SEC powerhouses, and Florida is definitely one of those places that's looking to rebuild and overhaul its roster. And they very well could find it in current Nebraska commit and Florida native CJ Brana. So we'll definitely be keeping close eye for all our Florida fans and also for all our Nebraska fans, because somebody's going to win or lose in that one.
Well, somebody was winning more down the stretch in Gainesville, Florida this past November than they were earlier in the season after a quarterback switch from Graham Mertz to DJ Lagway. And so all that talent that came to the surface that was talked about for a long time, we got to see in his freshman season. We didn't think necessarily that would happen because Graham Mertz threw 20 touchdowns and only 3 picks the year before he had a decent season. But DJ Lagway took advantage of a bad situation and an injury to Graham Mertz to emerge. And who knows, maybe he breaks through another layer this season and becomes a Heisman candidate.
Well, like I was talking about, during the spring, we have to occupy ourselves as media, as fans, in so many ways. So, of course, it's where does our team stand? Who do we like? Who are our guys? I call it that busy time. And when we were in the chat earlier for your show, and people were talking about, of course, Dylan Raiola versus DJ Lagway. It kind of sparked because, as you know, DJ Lagway is a kid that I've gone to bat with. I've watched watched him through his time at Willis. There was hoping that we would get him to come to another SEC team, but I won't mention that team since I tend to mention them a lot. But he definitely stood on business when he faced that team, and gave him an upset, and Lane Kiffin and whatnot. But again, I just had to throw that in there because it kind of sparked my interest. Who are my early Heisman candidate, hopefuls, and after what DJ Lagway has done anchoring at such a young age, is he perfect? Does he still have growing pains? Of course he does. But I've watched this kid anchor a pretty good ball club in high school through the Florida Gators, and what he's done and his talent. He's a kid, like I said, that he's just a strong leader. And something else that we don't talk a lot about the Heisman outside of skill set. I was talking to Hatfield earlier, and he's like, Mom, it's a little early to talk about Heisman. He goes, well, what about Smith? And I was like, well, we're gonna talk about quarterback. So I'm talking about if we're gonna go Heisman and we're going quarterback. That's why I'm talking about DJ Lagway. But, another thing I want to showcase that we don't talk a lot about with the athletes, DJ Lagway, not only has he put and been all in on the recruiting trail, trying to bring kids to Gainesville, he's helped turn the program around. I think he's a big reason why Billy Napier is still out in Gainesville. I think that him standing behind Billy Napier in those tough times and really talking to other players helped kind of shift things and kind of buy in it. And we've seen what's going on in Gainesville. But another thing you got to love about DJ Lagway, what he does for that Florida community. This is a kid who's got plenty of NIL coming his way. And it's great to see that he not only supports his own program, but he is constantly out there giving back to the Florida Gator community. And, as much as we talk about the Heisman skill set, what I really love about DJ Lagway, and that's why I like him for a Heisman, is that he embodies what I like to say, the old school tradition of a Heisman. Not only does he show up on the field for his team, he shows up for athletic community. He's hosted several things. Part of his NIL, he's giving back to, the Gator Foundation. So there's just a lot you got to love about this kid. This is a kid, whether you're a Florida Gator fan or not, you got to love what he puts on the field, the product he puts on the field, but also what he does as an athlete. So again, kind of had to bring him up because we're talking about Dylan Raiola. We're talking about DJ Lagway, and that's a kid, like I said, that I've watched rise up the ranks, back in Willis, Texas, when nobody was talking about DJ Lagway. Like you mentioned, Mark, nobody had the belief in DJ Lagway that he was going to be able to turn the Florida Gators around, because again, a lot of times we get blinded by his youthness. But again, this is a kid that I've watched be very mature in his level of play. So exciting to watch to see where he goes. So my early Heisman candidate campaign, DJ Lagway for Heisman. So we'll see how that resonates. But again, it's a long way, but I know we're throwing out polls and rankings, so I wasn't going to delve into where Ole Miss is going, where the Crimson Tide is going to be. I'll save that for you. But I did have to take a poke at where I think the Heisman goes. Definitely far, far too early. But again, I like DJ Lagway all the way around for that.
Okay. I'm going to have to look up the Vegas betting odds and see what kind of money you might make if you decide to lay down a dime or two. All right. So while we've got the OT7s going on, we also have the Under Armour in Charlotte at the same time. So may I ask, the athletes' selections or decisions on where they go, and is there any difference between the two circuits and the two camps?
Well, the Under Armour camp is more like a combine style. It's a regional camp, of course. Under Armour, it's in conjunction with the elite regionals, the Elite 11 regionals, the All 22. That's a new thing, and that's really Mark opportunity where we get to see defensive linemen, we get to see more positions. So this is not like a 7-on-7. These are the camps that we've talked about. We've talked a lot about the regional talent. We've talked a lot about Clemson and UNC really, really going to their backyard. So this was a perfect setting for the Under Armour camp, of course, hosting a regional camp where we saw a lot of elite talent out in Charlotte this weekend. So I'm just going to go quickly through the list. The guy that really, really surprisingly caught my eye when I got to watch his film, and continues to separate another cornerback out of Howe in Cornelius, North Carolina, is Samurai Matthews. I mean, with a name like Samurai, it's no question that he was born to play defense. He can chop up an offense like nobody's business. He really is a kid that has fit the bill. His stock just completely rose. He stole the show. He was my showstopper all weekend long for some of the top talent out of Carolina. He just had multiple interceptions, pass breakups on that one-on-one. He's really great in disrupting in the coverage. And again, his back pedal is just extremely well when he plays the ball. So he's a top 100 prospect. Let's see. I'm trying to go through all my notes. He's just really good at anticipating routes, and he's just really good at reading an offense. Again, he still has some things I think to work at as far as development, but who doesn't? Even the best of the best can always have something. But he's one of the more intriguing quarterbacks for me in this 2026 class. So obviously, Clemson, South Carolina, and Texas are some of the schools to watch out in his recruitment. One of the ones to really watch it that could be in a very immediate need for him would be Florida State. But he's looking to take some visits and then hopefully make his commitment closer to the start of his senior season. Around August is what we're hearing. But again, Clemson, South Carolina, of course, the two top state schools looking to get him. Again, Samurai Matthews stole the show for me as far as the Under Armour talent was just really a for a cornerback position. He's going to be really intriguing. Again, Florida State is the one that's kind of been coming in kind of quiet along with Texas. So again, I think after this weekend, it'll be interesting to see, like we always say, Mark, you got to follow the visits, especially the unofficial visits for these kids. And they're definitely going to be on the move as spring ball has already is going to culminate this weekend for most of the big programs. We're going to make the shift to a lot of official, unofficial visits. May, of course, June will be a big time because that will be the designated time where we'll see a lot of recruits, prospects hit some of these camps. Of course, we know July will be a complete dead period, which is a little bit different. We usually have a weekend open in July after a long June haul, but again, recruiting will look a lot different this summer. So May and June will be heavily busy. Of course, we'll see during that May evaluation, a lot of these prospects, coaches will be allowed to go on the road once again. So we'll see a lot of appearances at spring ball and whatnot. So again, the spring's definitely kind of the calm before the storm. But again, Samurai Matthews stole the show at Under Armour in Charlotte this weekend. He definitely was my headliner.
So, Leanne, we've got another cornerback lined up in Charlotte.
Like I said, you can never look too ahead in the 2027 class. Joshua Dobson, another local kid of the Carolinas. He's going to be one to watch. He really was another kid that you really couldn't match up well against. He plays at a different base, but he's another really physical kid. He's just got really dominance. I think that for his size and his speed, he has a lot of tangibles that I think as he continues to develop, he's really going to have a breakout. He's really, and like I said, extremely athletic. He's got extremely strong coverage skills, flexible. Like I said, he moves his body. He's got great speed. And he's just going to be one to watch as well at the corner position.
And as we keep down the path in the Under Armour in Charlotte, we got Trayshawn Ruffin.
Trayshawn Ruffin, elite as they can be. He is the top commitment for Bill Belichick. He has just really kind of ruffled the feathers out in UNC, pushing about 6'2", 340. Normally when we see these events, they really do showcase the corners, the wide receivers. Yes, we got defensive linemen. Yes, we got linemen. We got offensive linemen. But when we talk on some of those one-on-one drills, we really don't get to see a lot out of our linemen guys. But in this case, I think Ruffin really showed, despite his body and his bigger body frame, that he just has a really unique quickness. Again, we talk about linemen having to have a quick step, but he definitely separates himself because he has a unique quickness for his size. again, he's become Bill Belichick's poster child. I got to talk with him a little bit. He's hopefully will be on the show with us sometime next week, and we're going to be talking a little bit of Carolina football. So the cat is out of the bag, but he's really just been excited of what he can build. Of course, he's an elite. He's already has so many high ceilings, but he's really become a strong recruiter for Bill Belichick and what he's building. He really likes the future. He kind of shared. I'm paraphrasing the long quote that he gave me because I don't have it up. But again, he's just a really strong tackle. I think that if he continues to improve on that footwork and that body quickness that he have, I think he's going to develop into something special. And I think that Bill Belichick can see that. And I can see why Bill Belichick is going all in with this high school talent, because I think he really resonates of that same kind of similar style when he was building a defense back in New England with the Patriots, what kind of players he built it on. And I feel like Shashawn Ruffin really fits that model that Bill Belichick likes to utilize in order to separate and make that defensive front and that interior line. So I think Ruffin has a really promising future ahead. And again, he's become, just when you hear him talk about Bill Belichick, he's an all in, and he's definitely been there recruiting. And again, we talk a lot about it. When you get high profile commits like Rushan, in here, and you get to see what they do, they really become, the face of the program, and he's definitely become that. But again, I think he had a great showing this weekend out at Charlotte, again, only solidifying why Bill Belichick sees something special in him. Again, he really does emulate those signature defensive interior linemen that Bill Belichick was known for building in New England with the Patriots. So it's going to be really exciting to see his anchor, be that anchor for that defensive front out in Chapel Hill, not in the so distant future.
Well, with so much emphasis on the skill position players because of the obvious 7-on-7 situation, we finally get to an interior offensive lineman that you are tracking. And again, going to the Under Armour in Charlotte, and Desmond Green.
Desmond Green, like I said, he's a kid that I really wanted to highlight. We talk a lot about linemen in general. They don't get enough love. One of the other positions that we've talked a lot about, Mark, that is really kind of rising up the ranks, that teams are really looking to secure, not just a highly regarded lineman, but in that interior aspect of the line, the interior line, the interior linemen have really become a rising rank. And Desmond Green out of Timberland really caught my eye. I don't think that there's many guys that possess his kind of frame and the way he's just built, that he's just built differently. And I think that when you see him, I think he's got a little bit of, I think when he gets into the right program, when he's able to kind of feel out his body and really get it to where it needs to be, I think he's going to be something dangerous. He's got exceptional movement with his skills and his footwork. I think that he's going to be a talented guy on that offensive line. And I think that he's got a lot of flashes that we got to see this weekend of a lot of potential. So it's going to be really interesting to see exactly where he ends up. But again, a guy that's really rise up the ranks, 3-star lineman, slowly making up the ranks. I don't know if he's going to be that 5-star lineman, but again, for me, the ranks really don't matter. I think they're just indicators. But when you get to see kids in live reps, when you get to see kids outside of their element, like we saw Desmond, I think that he is a kid that's going to be something special. I think that he has a little bit of things to work on as far as, really coming into his own with his body and his frame and really utilizing it, embracing it as far as his skill set. But I think that he's going to be an interesting, and I think he's going to be a quiet riser at the next level in the right program. And I think he's going to be a big disruptor when he comes into his own and continues to reach that high ceiling kind of level talent at the right program. And it'll be interesting to see who continues to go after him. I think that it's very well possible that some of those in-state schools are going to go after him, because I think from what I saw, just given a little bit of fine tuning, that he's going to be someone that's dangerous in those trenches.
We call it on the move for good reason. Players on the move from high school football, trying to figure out where they're going to spend their next 3 to 4 years in college. And then also, of course, the transfer portal is coming up. That was insane in December. We expect more of the same, maybe not quite the quantity, but still plenty of players on the move starting next week. So we'll be tracking that along with, of course, Leanne's on top of the recruiting 24/7, 365. You can catch her work at Cat's Wire and also Rebel Walk covering Ole Miss and Kentucky. Leanne, anything else we need to let the fine people know?
Well, just like I said, it looks like we're going to be going prime time as we work out the kinks. We're definitely going to be bringing more to you, of course, this weekend. I will be tossing a coin because it will be either be the Under Armour camp out in Houston, looking some of the best Houston talent. You never want to pass up getting to see live reps from all the talent that's out of Houston. Or I will be back at Dallas for the OT7 Golden Ticket Weekend. This is one that I'm kind of leaning towards just because it's a lot of teams that aren't in that regular season rotation. These are teams from all over that are looking to get a chance and an opportunity to be able to play in the championship out there later in June. To be determined location. So it's always exciting to see those guys that want those teams that are looking to punch their ticket. So it would definitely be a different showcase. We're hearing, of course, Grand Elite's going to be there. Booby Feaster, a kid that we've talked a lot about, and some other talented kids. So it's going to be a toss-up between Dallas or Houston, but nonetheless, we'll be bringing you some great intel. Of course, keeping our eyes and ears open as we are preparing for the calm before the storm that is the transfer portal. And of course, we know that this weekend, as programs wrap up their different spring, whether it is a showcase or it is a whatever, I don't even know how to call it anymore. Mark, you seem to probably address it a lot better. That definitely the rosters are going to start being relooked at and kind of seeing the direction, of course, seeing what translated this spring and whatnot. And so next week, definitely come midnight when the portal opens, that it's going to be popping. But again, you can already tell kind of feelers out that there's some kids already making those notions of where they're trying to go, and agents are definitely working overtime along with coaches and recruiting, but we're going to be here for it. As always, make sure you lock in, even though we're here on the main channel. Go like and subscribe to the recruiting. And when you can't catch us on the move because you're on the move, if you're like me, you want to listen to sports on the radio, you can stream us on all your favorite audio platforms.
And in the meantime, you're going to see me next time at 4 p.m. Eastern time, right back here, taking your calls. And we got Greg Flugard jumping on to talk realignment and all that's going on with this hearing regarding the NCAA. But you can catch Leanne all the time. Just lock in on Twitter. It's Leanne Herring, RW. That's the follow you need to make. And otherwise, we will see you back here on Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, everyone. Leanne, another great show out of you. And I like the primetime spot. So we will keep it going with everyone and catch up with the transfer portal updates next week. So we'll see you then.
See you guys.